acknowledging the power of your environment and forest therapy. That is going to be the topic of this episode of Chi Life. I'm recording this vlog in a beautiful little spot in the fernery. I think they call it the Fern Gully in the Royal Botanic Gardens in Melbourne. And just yesterday I was teaching an Introduction to Qigong walking workshop in the Botanic Gardens in Geelong, which is just outside of Melbourne, maybe a bit over an hour outside of Melbourne. And you might notice that whenever possible I record these vlogs outdoors and in nature. Sometimes not, always, surrounded by trees and things like that. Sometimes I might be in a more built up area, but wherever possible, I'm going to be outdoors and in nature. And sometimes, I'll let you know, that makes the recording of these vlogs much more challenging because of issues with noise, vehicles going past, people going past and yelling, and just all the things that go on when you're outside in public spaces. Issues with wind, sometimes with rain, and sometimes that means I don't get to record the vlogs that I want to and I have to put it off and do it later. But unless I absolutely have to, that's where I try to record my vlogs. And the reason for this is that our environment has a powerful effect on us. And so of course it's good just for myself to be outdoors, and if I make sure I film these vlogs outdoors, it's one way to make sure I spend some time doing that. But even in terms of this video, now look, I don't bring really high production values to the recording of these vlogs, but just seeing me outdoors in a small way has an effect on you watching the video. The effect of being out in nature is that powerful that even through a screen it has a bit of an effect on the people watching it. So I do realize that in some of these vlogs I'm recording, I am revisiting some topics that I've talked about in other vlogs previously, and this is one of them. I have talked about the power of our environment a number of different times in vlogs, and here I am talking about it again. And part of the reason for that is, well, I was teaching this workshop, this Qigong walking workshop out in Geelong just yesterday, and that was with Susan, who is she's a Qigong instructor, but her main focus is on forest therapy. And I'm going to talk a bit more about what forest therapy is a little bit later on and how that connects with Qigong actually. And so as part of that, I spent some time with Susan and with Dita as well, her partner, who are both deeply involved in forest therapy. And this brought up interesting topics for us to talk about and in different angles on the same subject that I've talked about before. And so it's natural, when you're in different environments, talking with different people, sometimes different things come up. And I think there's some more, there's probably always going to be more interesting things to say about the power of our environment. But there were particularly some things that came out of those conversations that I had with Susan and with Dita, just over the last couple of days. So one of the things that we talked about at one point was, because Susan and Dita are deeply involved in forest therapy, which is essentially about getting people to go outdoors into nature and to really appreciate their connection with nature. And this is done from the point of view of therapeutic benefit. Of course, people can do it just for their own enjoyment. But one of the things that is really interesting about I suppose you could call it the forest therapy movement, is their desire, their efforts to make a direct link between being outdoors and the benefits that has on your health, your mental health, your physical health, and so on. And there's some pretty good research on this. And one of the things I didn't really know about forest therapy is a lot of this. In many ways you can say forest therapy as a concept is ancient. Like, we've always known it's good to get outdoors, right? Going back thousands of years, we've known it's been good to get outdoors and into nature. But forest therapy as it exists now really rose up in the 80s, the 1980s, when in Japan a group of people did specific research into the benefits of being outdoors and being in nature. And so they didn't just rely on traditional and perhaps even common sense knowledge about the benefits of being in nature. They went about measuring some of the benefits. And there's some really good research showing some of those benefits. And so one of the things that we talked about was why there's a reluctance in a therapeutic setting for doctors, for public health authorities and things like that to promote things like forest therapy and the benefit of being outdoors as extensively as maybe would make sense, because the benefits really are so powerful. And I think, one of the big reasons for this is, of course, the modern medical paradigm, where they're really looking for, you could say, they're simple interventions in terms of very direct, prescribe a medication, a procedure, something like that, where you just do this. Hopefully that'll sort out whatever your problem is. Of course, often it will sort out whatever your problem is, which is great. But then often it doesn't really fully address your problem, and there can be side effects and things like that as well. But there's, the paradigm is use these very, very simple interventions where it's just prescribe something, procedure, whatever it is, do that. Now, of course, not everyone in the modern medical system thinks about things that way, and there's lots of people who are within the system who are wanting to look more widely at ways to improve people's overall health and well-being. But these are more challenging to implement because there's a lot more of it relies on people essentially doing things for themselves, right? Like to go outdoors and to do it on a regular basis and really appreciate your connection with nature, depends how you look at it. That's either a simple thing that's easy to do. For some people, that's how they'll perceive it. But for other people, depending particularly on their mental state, that just like, oh man, that's way harder than just popping a pill, and getting the benefits from that. So I think that's one thing that's going against the power of our environment being more fully recognized and more fully utilized within the modern medical system. But as we were talking about this, and I was, sort of thinking on this topic a bit more, and, why more broadly, perhaps, the power of our environment isn't recognized and utilized fully, I realized that even amongst people outside of the modern medical system, maybe people who, using alternative healing methods, amongst a lot of them, there's also a tendency to not fully acknowledge the power of our environment. And part of this, again, can be maybe there's other types of treatments that they're using and it's easier for them to prescribe in some way. But there's also a tendency amongst people, working in alternative ways to focus very much on the internal power, what changes within us to change our situation. And it is true that when you can't change anything going on around you, maybe you can change what's going on inside you, and this is a valuable thing to do so that you can make progress, improve your health, and so on. But if we only focus on that, we're missing, well, we're not seeing the whole picture, and we're missing some powerful tools that can make such a big difference to ourselves, and again, both our mental health and our physical health. And why make it hard on ourselves? Why only focus on working one way where we could also use other tools as a way to make the whole process easier for ourselves? But yeah, there can be this real tendency to just like, no, it's what's inside, change the internal environment. Which again, there's validity in if that's all you can do doing that. But there's a lot of things that it's really hard to shift, really hard to change without also changing the external environment. And that doesn't just mean going out into nature. That is a powerful thing. It can mean other things in our internal environment or our external environment as well. Things like, even within our house where we live or where we work, making changes in those spaces that will allow our energy to flow more freely as well. So those of you who do Qigong, well, you'll probably have noticed, not just these vlogs, a lot of the videos I make demonstrating Qigong practices, I do those outdoors as well. And we often, when I'm running courses, we often talk about the power of doing your practice outdoors. Now, if you can't always practice outdoors, that's simply not going to be practical all the time, and so it's great to practice indoors if that's what's suitable for you. But there's so much power in getting outdoors, if you possibly can, and you'll find that your Qigong practice becomes much richer if you do that as well. So I did say that I was going to talk a bit more about what forest therapy is. Talked a little bit about that in this video. And there's more that I want to say about that, but I think it ties in better probably with a topic of another vlog that I'm going to be making soon. So I might save talking more about that until then. Anyway, look forward to seeing you on another video soon.